America once idolized their faces on the silver screen. Their voices could stir emotions across a nation. They stood as symbols of patriotism and national pride, or so it seemed. Yet behind the glamour, many of Hollywood's brightest stars held a startling truth. They secretly loathed the very nation that built their fame. According to a longtime Tonight Show producer, Johnny Carson knew exactly which celebrities truly loved America and which ones only pretended to for the public. After certain guests exited the stage, Johnny would lean toward Ed McMahon and quip, "They'll cash our checks, but they sure don't care for this country." Throughout his 3-decade reign as late-night television's king, Carson spoke with thousands of Hollywood legends. His easygoing interviews often led stars to confess more than they planned, including their honest feelings about America. While the red light was on, these actors waved the flag. But once the cameras shut off, Johnny heard the truth. Tonight, we uncover Carson's private list of 10 Golden Age stars who secretly held anti-American beliefs. The legends who gained riches and fame on U.S. soil while quietly condemning the country that adored them. 1. Charlie Chaplin, the comedian who stopped laughing at America. Charlie Chaplin's lovable little tramp made audiences around the world fall in love with him. His silent films earned millions and turned him into one of the first true movie superstars. But behind the trademark bowler hat was a man whose bond with America had soured. According to a former Tonight Show writer, Chaplin was often the first name Johnny mentioned when talking about stars who grew bitter toward the nation. Carson studied comedy history obsessively. Chaplin began as a hero in his eyes, but became a warning. Though he lived in the U.S. for more than 40 years, the London-born Chaplin never became an American citizen. As his fame rose, so did his political outspokenness. His 1940 masterpiece, The Great Dictator, boldly mocked Adolf Hitler when America still hadn't entered World War II. What once seemed noble later drew suspicion. Chaplin's alleged communist leanings soon attracted government attention. During the Red Scare of the late 1940s, he was investigated by the FBI and the House Un-American Activities Committee. His sympathy for Soviet friendship groups, criticism of capitalism, and ties to known leftists made him a lightning rod for controversy. Johnny could tell the difference between criticizing a policy and despising your country, recalled a former NBC executive. But he felt Chaplin crossed that line, especially when he spoke abroad. The breaking point came in 1952. While traveling to London for the premiere of Limelight, Chaplin learned his re-entry permit had been revoked by U.S. Attorney General James McRanery. Effectively exiled, he chose to remain in Switzerland, saying, "I have been the victim of lies and propaganda from powerful reactionary forces." Johnny could joke about anyone, except Chaplin, remembered a Tonight Show writer. He'd just smirk and move on. Carson believed Chaplin had taken all America offered, only to turn his back on it when it no longer suited him. Chaplin returned just once in 1972 to accept an honorary Oscar. To Carson, he remained the prime example of a star who thrived under America's spotlight while scorning the light itself. 2. Jane Fonda, from Hollywood royalty to Hanoi Jane. Born to beloved actor Henry Fonda, Jane Fonda rose to become one of the most acclaimed actresses of her generation. But her actions during the Vietnam War earned her a permanent spot on Carson's list of questionable patriots. She was easily Johnny's most polarizing guest, recalled a former Tonight Show producer. You could feel the tension in the room whenever she sat down. In 1972, Fonda visited North Vietnam, where she infamously posed on an anti-aircraft gun used against American pilots, an image that branded her Hanoi Jane. During radio broadcasts, she claimed U.S. POWs were treated well and accused American leaders of war crimes. The backlash was instant. NBC received floods of letters demanding Carson ban her from the show, said a network executive. But Johnny, a firm believer in free speech, continued to invite her, though privately he never forgave her actions. According to those close to him, Carson was disturbed by Fonda's portrayal of America as the aggressor in Vietnam. He personally disliked the war, but was appalled that she lent her voice to enemy propaganda. She smiled sweetly on Johnny's couch, said a former cameraman who had served in Vietnam. But the veterans watching at home never smiled back.
Carson remained polite on air but blunt behind the scenes. He believed she'd crossed the line between protest and betrayal. Fonda later apologized for the anti-aircraft photo, though she continued to defend her anti-war stance. To Carson, the apology came too late. She stood as the clearest example of a star who used her American fame to strike at America itself. Number 3. Marlon Brando, the rebel without respect for his country. Marlon Brando redefined acting with his raw, emotional performances in A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront. His genius was unquestionable, and, in Johnny's opinion, so was his disdain for American ideals. Brando fascinated Johnny, said a Tonight Show writer. Here was a man who owed everything to Hollywood, yet constantly trashed the very society that celebrated him. Throughout his career, Brando railed against American foreign policy, racial injustice, and corporate greed. Carson admired his honesty, but believed Brando's scorn for the country itself went too far. To Johnny, Brando was a walking contradiction, a man who embodied the American dream while condemning the dreamers. While many agreed some of his points had value, Carson believed Brando's criticism crossed the line from insight to outright contempt for America. According to one former NBC executive, Johnny once remarked that Brando didn't despise fame, only the nation that gave it to him. To Carson, Brando embodied the hypocrisy of relishing American success while sneering at American ideals. The moment that sealed Brando's spot on Carson's private blacklist came during the 1973 Oscars. Brando won Best Actor for The Godfather, but refused to accept the award, sending Native American activist Sachin Littlefeather to read a rejection speech denouncing Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans and referencing the Wounded Knee standoff. That public gesture, said a former producer, deeply irritated Johnny. It wasn't Brando's sympathy for Native American rights that bothered him, it was the spectacle. Carson saw it as grandstanding, using America's most celebrated stage to scold the very country that made him famous instead of working toward practical change. As Brando withdrew further from the spotlight and grew more erratic, Carson saw him as not a reformer, but a man disconnected from and ungrateful to the nation behind his stardom. People close to Carson said Brando symbolized a certain breed of celebrity, one who built mystique through anti-American posturing while still living off the nation's adoration. Those who performed rebellion but cashed the checks anyway. 4. Vanessa Redgrave, the British star who condemned her paychecks. Though not a product of Hollywood's golden age, British actress Vanessa Redgrave earned her place on Carson's list for lambasting America, even as she pursued its wealth and prestige. She wasn't American, said a former Tonight Show booker, and that's exactly what made Johnny so irritated. To Carson, it was galling, a foreign star criticizing the very system fueling her career. During the 1970s, Redgrave became infamous for her radical leftist activism, including vocal support for the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which most Americans then viewed as a terrorist group. Her 1977 documentary, The Palestinian, condemned U.S. policy in the Middle East, accusing the country of imperialism and of backing Israel's aggression. The uproar climaxed at the 1978 Oscars, when Redgrave, accepting Best Supporting Actress for Julia, used her speech to thank the Academy for standing firm against a small bunch of Zionist hoodlums protesting her nomination. The stunned audience responded with boos. "She always had something to say," recalled one of Carson's former associates, "but never anything kind about the country signing her paychecks." Johnny reportedly viewed her as the embodiment of hypocrisy, denouncing American values while thriving off its audiences and opportunities. Insiders claimed Carson bristled most at what he saw as her condescending tone, as if she, a privileged British actress, had come to educate Americans about their own politics. Johnny could handle criticism, one former worker clarified, but Redgrave's comments felt smug, sweeping, and ungrateful considering how much she gained here. Number 5. Paul Robeson, the voice America silenced. Robeson stood out as one of the most complex figures on Carson's list, a gifted African-American singer, actor, and activist whose politics placed him in the crosshairs of the McCarthy era. While Carson respected Robeson's courage and his justified anger toward racism, he reportedly struggled to accept the man's open embrace of Soviet communism. Johnny admired Robeson's brilliance, a former Tonight Show researcher remembered, but couldn't reconcile his silence on Stalin's atrocities with his harsh condemnations of America. Robeson's fame soared in the 1930s and 40s through iconic performances in Showboat and Othello, yet his political stances soon overshadowed his artistry. He frequently praised the Soviet Union, refusing to denounce Stalin even as reports of mass purges and gulags spread. His 1949 speech at the Paris Peace Conference, in which he appeared to question why Black Americans should fight for a country that oppressed them, ignited national outrage. Although he later insisted his remarks were distorted, the backlash was swift. His passport revoked, concerts canceled, and records pulled from stores. He had one of the greatest voices and some of the most dangerous loyalties, said a former NBC executive. Carson reportedly felt Robeson's justified grievances had curdled into a rejection of America's core ideals. The FBI kept him under surveillance for years, and though his passport was restored in 1958, his career never fully recovered. Carson saw Robeson as a tragedy, a man of immense gifts whose justified fury led him toward a system just as oppressive as the one he fought against. For Carson, Robeson raised a haunting question. How do you judge a patriot who loves justice but loses faith in his own country? Carson, sources said, respected the pain that fueled Robeson's defiance, but believed his embrace of totalitarianism crossed the line from critique into betrayal.
6. Richard Burton, the Welsh star who mocked American culture. Welsh-born Richard Burton rose to become one of Hollywood's most commanding presences in the 1950s and 60s, earning record-breaking salaries and worldwide fame, especially after his fiery romance with Elizabeth Taylor turned them into cinema's most scrutinized couple. Carson's off-air remarks suggested Burton made little effort to hide his contempt for American ideals and culture. Elizabeth Taylor embraced America, Burton not at all. After hosting the couple, a former Tonight Show producer recalled Johnny saying Burton loved American money, but sneered at the people who earned it. Unlike many foreign actors who proudly adopted U.S. citizenship, Burton avoided it for years despite living in America most of his life. In public interviews, he frequently mocked what he saw as the nation's cultural emptiness, obsession with wealth, and lack of historical perspective. A Hollywood publicist once claimed Burton privately described America as a mad empire. He considered Americans naive, too easily dazzled by British accents and classical training. What most bothered Carson, insiders said, was how Burton's charming television persona contrasted with his private contempt for the country that made him rich. Carson came to believe Burton was eager to flatter American audiences when promoting films, yet had little real gratitude toward the land that gave him success. Johnny especially disliked performers who ridiculed American habits off stage, but switched on the charm when the cameras started rolling, recalled the Tonight Show director. To Johnny, Burton embodied that hypocrisy perfectly, magnetic and gifted, but deeply disdainful of America. His drinking often loosened his tongue, unleashing harsher criticism of American politics and culture. remarks that traveled fast through Hollywood gossip circles. Though Carson respected Burton's immense talent, he ultimately saw him as the archetypal outsider who profited from America while scorning it in private. A brilliant artist, Carson once said, but one who never understood gratitude. 7. Orson Welles, the prodigy who grew disillusioned with American success. Welles began as the golden child who reshaped radio and film with War of the Worlds and Citizen Kane. But in Carson's view, that early triumph curdled into bitterness toward the very system that had once celebrated him. According to a Tonight Show writer, Johnny often said Welles adored influence, but not the country that granted it. Their on-air conversations were captivating, but Carson sensed Welles had grown cynical toward America itself. Welles's connection to the U.S. was strained throughout his life. After the groundbreaking success of Citizen Kane, his later studio battles and box office failures left him feeling exiled from Hollywood. He spent long periods in Europe, returning only to earn money for his personal projects. The FBI compiled an extensive file on Welles, branding him a subversive for his outspoken politics and critiques of racism, corporate greed, and government abuse. In the tense climate of mid-century America, such beliefs were considered dangerous. A former NBC executive said Welles grew convinced America had traded art for profit. Carson empathized with his frustration, but felt Welles's anger had broadened from film studios to the nation itself. In his Tonight Show visits, Welles would lament America's commercialism and cultural ignorance, dismissing its intellectual shallowness. To Carson, those remarks went far beyond valid criticism. They revealed a deeper disdain for the country's core values. Johnny thought Welles was biting the hand that had once fed him, a producer remembered. He saw a man who'd been granted unmatched creative freedom, now complaining that America betrayed him. Carson found that tragic and warped. To him, Welles symbolized a certain kind of American genius, one who rose on the nation's shoulders, only to turn around and condemn it. Though Johnny admired his brilliance, he saw Welles's bitterness as misplaced resentment for his own fading career. 8. Jean Seberg, the small-town girl who lost faith in her homeland. Seberg's story struck Carson as one of Hollywood's darkest tragedies. Born in Iowa, she rose from obscurity to international fame, only to be destroyed by a government that viewed her political activism as treasonous. She tried to make America better. Instead, America broke her. A Tonight Show researcher remembered Johnny saying she began with love for her country, and the country turned that love into despair. Seberg became a star at 17 under Otto Preminger's direction in St. Joan, and later achieved worldwide fame with Breathless. But as the 1960s unfolded, her outspokenness drew the FBI's attention. Her financial support for the Black Panther Party made her a target of COINTELPRO, the agency's notorious surveillance and smear campaign. In 1970, the FBI leaked a false story that her unborn child was fathered by a Black Panther, which triggered premature labor that led to her baby's death. Each year afterward, Seberg attempted suicide on the anniversary of that tragedy. Johnny thought what was done to her was unforgivable, said a former producer. But he also believed her pain had turned into hatred for America itself. Carson saw her as someone who began with idealism and ended in alienation, a victim of persecution that twisted justifiable anger into rejection of the nation. The cycle haunted him: criticism leading to punishment, punishment breeding bitterness, bitterness hardening into hatred.
Seberg's mental health collapsed through the 70s, and she was found dead in Paris in 1979. Only later did public records confirm the FBI's role in her ruin. For Johnny, her life raised a terrible question. Can you still love a country that destroys you for wanting to make it better? He doubted anyone could. 9. Dennis Hopper, the rebel who foresaw America's fall. Hopper personified the wild rebellion of the 1960s, capturing the cultural rift with Easy Rider. But in Carson's mind, Hopper's disillusionment went beyond rebellion. It bordered on contempt for America itself. He wasn't just performing madness, he believed the country was collapsing. After one especially chaotic interview, a former Tonight Show booker recalled Johnny saying he found Hopper mesmerizing, yet deeply unsettling. Hopper's relationship with the mainstream was a constant fight. From his early days in Rebel Without a Cause to his drug-fueled escapades, he became both a creative force and a walking contradiction. Easy Rider made him a counterculture icon, but also deepened his estrangement from Hollywood. In countless interviews, Hopper called America rotting from within, predicting social breakdown and glorifying psychedelics as tools of revolution. Carson, fascinated by the era's youth movement, still believed Hopper's rhetoric went too far. Johnny thought Dennis didn't just criticize America, he seemed to want it to burn, said a former producer. Hopper's appearances were unpredictable theater, one night philosophical, the next combative and incoherent. He wore his radicalism proudly, railing against what he mocked as plastic America. While Carson appreciated the honesty, he was disturbed by Hopper's total rejection of the nation's ideals. To Johnny, Hopper's worldview felt juvenile, brilliant but destructive, full of energy, with no loyalty to the country that gave him a stage. Johnny understood calling out America's flaws, but he believed Hopper took almost perverse joy in foretelling its collapse, turning critique into something closer to resentment than reform. As Hopper's fame and personal stability unraveled throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, his rebellious streak hardened into what Carson privately regarded as outright anti-Americanism, a rejection not merely of leadership or policy, but of the nation's cultural essence itself. When Hopper eventually regained sobriety and rebuilt his reputation in the late 1980s, his once radical politics softened noticeably. In a twist few could have predicted, the man who once embodied the counterculture even joined the Republican Party later in life, a shift Carson found both ironic and telling about the performative streak behind some anti-American rhetoric. They had it coming. After all, in 18th century England, public executions were entertainment. 10. Truman Capote, the literary darling who loathed the values of his own country. Truman Capote stood as one of America's most acclaimed authors, winning praise for In Cold Blood and enjoying elite social status among the cultural elite. Yet, according to Carson's personal impressions, Capote carried an unmistakable disdain for the conventional morals and institutions of American life. He adored Manhattan. He detested America. A former Tonight Show producer remembered Carson remarking after one of Capote's appearances, Johnny saw Capote as the kind of privileged intellectual who thrived on American opportunity while sneering at American people. Capote's sharp voice, clever wit, and gossip-driven charm made him a recurring favorite on The Tonight Show. But away from the cameras, he was said to mock what he saw as the country's backward values, limited sophistication, and lack of cultural depth. Throughout his career, Capote targeted the American justice system, a central theme in Cold Blood, as well as the nation's politics, which he dismissed as theatrical farce, and its celebrity obsession, which he both condemned and exploited. While his critiques often held truth, Carson privately believed they hinted at a deeper aversion to America's character itself. Capote, one writer recalled, could be vicious about Middle America, religion, and traditional values, insulting the very audience that adored The Tonight Show. Carson found it striking that Capote never realized he was demeaning the same readers who made him rich and famous. What unsettled Carson most, said those close to him, was Capote's conviction that European culture stood inherently above American culture, a belief that ignored the nation's creativity and innovation. Johnny had a particular frustration with Americans who idolize Europe as superior, a director remembered. To him, that mindset betrayed ignorance of what made America special, its openness, vitality, and endless reinvention. As Capote's addiction worsened, his denunciations of American society grew harsher and more absolute. In Carson's view, Capote symbolized a familiar figure,
someone who achieved fame and fortune through America's system while maintaining the attitude of an outsider looking down on it all. Carson often said that being a celebrity was a performance, but being a citizen required sincerity, recalled his producer. He admired those who managed both, who could embrace fame while still engaging honestly with America's flaws and possibilities. In the end, Carson's list was less about condemnation and more about curiosity, a reflection of one man's lifelong effort to understand how love of country can coexist with the urge to question it. It leaves us still asking, what do we owe to the nation that gives us opportunity? Where does fair criticism end and rejection begin? And most of all, what does it truly mean to love America, imperfections and all?